Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more buckshot testing, and today we've got another new choke to try out, and it's definitely one that a lot of you guys have been suggesting that I pick up here recently. And I've been wanting to pick it up for a while now too, so when I saw it on sale, I had to get one to see what it could actually do and to see if it is kind of a gimmick or if it might actually be worth something. But for today's setup that we're going to be running, I brought out the Remington 1187 here, but for a choke, I picked up one of these, one of the Carlson's Coyote chokes. And a lot of you guys have been wanting to see, are these Carlson's Coyote chokes actually worth it, and do they actually help at all? Now what's interesting here is they say that they've gotten their best patterns with T-shot and 4-buck. So we're gonna kind of test a little bit of that and see how much is true, and probably even run some bigger, larger buckshot pellets through it as well at some point to see what it actually does. Now there is no constriction reference anywhere on this package or on their website or anything. So I did measure the actual constriction of this choke, and surprisingly enough, it's 665. So you're looking at essentially a turkey choke here. Now there's no special straight rifling or anything like that. It does have a couple small ports on the side, but nothing too major. And other than that, there's really nothing special about this choke. So is that going to be too tight for your average buckshot load or something? I don't know. It's definitely going to be pretty interesting to see what this can actually do. And for the shells we're going to start with, I brought out some of these, the Federal Power-Shok buckshot loads. These ones are their 12 gauge, 2 3/4 inch, 27 pellet load of 4-buck, moving about 1,325 feet per second. So I figured since they said they were seeing good patterns on the package out of 4-buck, these might be a decent starting point for us. We know that these are pretty average as far as performance goes. We've seen some disappointments. We've seen some little bit better patterns. So I kind of already know what the average is for these shells. So we'll be able to see, is that Carlson's actually going to make any difference for them or not. But as for today's test, everything is set up the same as we would usually do it for a buckshot load. I've got the big sheet of paper at 40 yards. I've got the chronograph so we can get our velocity, and I've got the templates that we can lay up over our results. So let's get you guys to view this target and see just what this Carlson's Coyote choke can do with these Federal 4-buck shells. Alright, so that shell gave us 1373 through the chrono. The boss claim is 1325, but we have been seeing right in the mid 1300s or so for velocity from these shells. So out of my 28-inch barrel on that 1187, that is pretty much common and what I would expect to see. So looking perfectly fine for velocity up here, but let's go down and take a look at our pattern and see if we actually got anything good out of it or not. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard target, and this is what we got. And I gotta say, it is pretty much middle of the road for these shells right off the bat. Now the white dot was my point of aim. The paper is 36 inches wide by probably about 42 to 44 inches tall or so. And we did have all 27 pellets on the paper here. We might have been just a touch off to the left, but really our hot area of our core is pretty centered up where that white dot is, it would seem. Now I did measure the farthest 2 points across, which is that very top right pellet down to this very far left pellet over here, and that gave us right at a 30-inch spread at 40 yards. So definitely not the best we've seen out of these shells, that's for sure. And I will say this kind of looks like we might be on the verge of over constricting these. At 665 is what that choke measures out at. It just seems a little bit on the tighter side, especially for a shell that does have a wad in it, but they are not a plated pellet. So with how this pattern looks, having a little bit of tightening in our core right around that white dot, but around the edges having a bunch of these pellets just kind of flung out, I think we're starting to hit the constriction limit here, or just a little bit over it. These did noticeably better last week through the AVNX Crusher Heavy Modified choke, which is an improved modified constriction. So not a terrible pattern overall. Is it good enough to use for coyotes or something at 40 yards? Yes, but definitely not the big improvement that I was hoping to see for a starting point here. But I guess let's throw a couple templates up and take a little bit better look at how this actually would have performed in some more real life scenarios. Alright, so here's our 10-inch circle, and if we put it in the middle of our pattern where our core should be, we had 3 pellets in there out of a 27 pellet load. Now, if we were to move that template over to the right just a little bit, we would gain a couple of pellets and probably have about 5 or 6 in there, which that could be our core, and we just had the edges flare out a little bit. But if you were to put it dead center of the pattern, we would have 3 in there. So definitely nothing I would call amazing for a core, but let's throw a couple animal templates up and see what the pattern would have looked like if you would have actually taken this particular shot out there in the field. All right, so we'll start off here real quick with the deer template. I know that these are 4 buck, and not everybody uses 4 buck for deer and a coyote choke, so we're kind of looking at a predator setup here. But we will glance at the deer template for a second, just for somebody that would be interested in using this combo for a deer hunt. And clearly, you would have a dead deer there, but you would also cover him with shot quite a bit more than what I would typically like to. Now, on a deer drive or something where you're going to be shooting at a running deer, that might really work out for you. But there is a little bit of a lack of pellets right through the lungs there as well, which plays into what we saw earlier with that 10-inch circle. So for a deer template, definitely not what I would call ideal, or not exactly what I'm looking for, but there it is for those of you that would be interested in it. But now let's throw the hog template up, which is a little bit closer to that coyote size and will give us a little better reference as to what this combo might typically be used for. Alright, so here's that hog template, and yep, you would definitely have a dead hog here all day long if you were to use this combo for those guys, but a coyote would be just a touch smaller than this hog template, and you would still have a plenty good enough of a pattern out to 40 to get the job done on those guys. Now, past that, you could probably stretch that to 50 and still be okay, but definitely with this combination of shell, I don't think it's the 70-yard pattern that they claim to see on the packaging of that choke. I mean, they were stating that they were seeing good patterns with most 4-buck shells out to 70 yards with that choke. This one, I don't know if I would push it quite that far. So at the end of the day here, is it a decent pattern? Yeah, but I definitely would not call it anything amazing or groundbreaking, that's for sure. I think we're probably on the verge, or maybe just a little bit over constricting these at 665, especially since they seem to do really well out of that improved modified crusher last week. So a little bit of middle of the road results here for a starting point with that Carlson's Coyote choke. I think we can find the right shell for it, but these Federal Power-Shoks, good enough, but nothing amazing either. I was definitely hoping to see a little bit better of a result. But that's why you test things, because you never really know what combo is going to work and what combo isn't. So now we just got to run some other shells through it and see what it likes and what it doesn't like. Okay, and here's the wad from that shell, and it's nothing fancy or anything for a buckshot load, but you can see it's starting to get a little bit banged up around the edges and stuff, which tells me we're probably hitting the constriction limit once again here. We don't have any holes through the wad like a pellet actually would have scraped the inside of the bore or the choke or anything, so we're looking good there, but it's definitely a little bit more beat up than what it typically is. So nothing too special to take note of with the wad, but it just kind of reaffirms that we're probably at that constriction limit for these shells. All right, y'all. Well, what did you think about that performance right there? That is pretty much middle of the road for these shells. We've seen worse out of them, but we've definitely seen better as well. There's no doubt about that. Is that a good enough pattern to do the job out to 40 or 50 yards? Yes, but with how that looks, having a little bit of tightening in the core with that whole edge over there being kind of sporadic, it probably means that we are potentially over constricting these at 665. So I guess we're just going to have to see moving forward with that Coyote choke. Is it just a one-off with these particular shells not being a fan of that constriction or something? Or is it going to become kind of a theme with a lot of shells we put through it being over-constricted? I don't know, but as for today's results, I was definitely hoping to see quite a bit more improvement than that, but I guess it didn't completely destroy our pattern either based on what we had seen from these shells previously. So I guess leave your thoughts in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see, or were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested these shells or one of those Carlson's Coyote chokes? And if so, what kind of results have you seen from them? And is there another shell that you might want to see through that Coyote choke? Let me know all that down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.